In the dim, flickering glow of a single bedside lamp in a modest suburban home in suburban Chicago, 1997, 8-year-old Catherine Doyle clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, its once bright fur matted with the sticky residue of unspoken terror. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly toward midnight, each second a hammer blow against the fragile silence of the house. Her small fingers trembled as she dialed the emergency line on the rotary phone. Her voice, a fragile whisper cracking under the weight of the unimaginable, finally breaking free after years of suffocating dread. "My daddy, he hurts me, in ways that no one should ever know," she stammered to the operator, her words tumbling out like shards of broken glass, slicing through the night. "He says it's our secret game, but it's not a game. It burns and it makes me want to disappear." The operator's gasp echoed through the line, a prelude to the chaos that would soon engulf the Doyle family. But in that moment, Catherine's confession hung in the air like a noose, tightening around the throat of normalcy itself. Imagine, if you dare, the raw terror of a child old enough to understand the violation, but too young to grasp why the monster wore the face of love. Fear coils in your gut like a serpent, doesn't it? The kind that whispers, this could be any home, any family, any child next door. Intrigue pulls you deeper, a morbid curiosity about how such darkness festers undetected, blooming in the shadows of PTA meetings and backyard barbecues. And beneath it all, a thread of empathy tugs at your heart, for Catherine, whose innocence was methodically stripped away night after night, in the very place meant to shield her. Horror seeps in as you picture the bruises hidden under long sleeves, the vacant stare in her school photos, the way her laughter faded like an echo in an empty hallway. Suspense grips you now because this isn't just a tale of abuse. It's a descent into the fractured psyche of a father who convinced himself his actions were acts of twisted affection, a mind warped by delusions so profound they blurred the line between protector and predator. But here's the hook that will reel you in and refuse to let go. Behind Catherine's unthinkable confession lies a revelation so shattering, so profoundly disturbing about the human mind's capacity for self-deception and denial, that it will make you question every normal family you've ever known. What if the dangerous truth she dared to speak wasn't just about the horrors inflicted upon her, but about a psychiatric unraveling in her father that mirrored the very symptoms he hid from the world? Symptoms that turned a grieving widower into a vessel for unspeakable urges? Few know the full extent of how his untreated trauma from losing his wife morphed into a delusional disorder, where he genuinely believed his games were healing rituals passed down from his own abusive childhood, a cycle he swore to break but instead perpetuated with chilling precision. This isn't mere crime. It's a psychiatric abyss that exposes how the mind can rewrite evil as endearment, justice as complicity, and safety as an illusion. Could your own buried pains, left unchecked, twist into something unrecognizable? How fragile is the barrier between sanity and the abyss, really? And what happens when a child's voice pierces that veil, only to reveal that the real monster might be the silence we all enforce? These questions aren't rhetorical. They're the shadows that will haunt you until the end, gnawing at the edges of your certainty about the world. They demand answers, pulling you into this dark tunnel where every revelation strips away another layer of illusion. This case, drawn from the chilling annals of American monsters, reminds us of morality's razor-thin edge, how one unchecked fracture in the psyche can shatter lives, leaving us all vulnerable to the evil that whispers from within. It underscores the unpredictability of the human mind, a labyrinth where grief can curdle into predation and love into something profane. Anyone, your neighbor, your friend, even the reflection in your mirror, could harbor such fragility, teetering on the brink of becoming the unthinkable. Now, in this moment of shared unease, let's connect. You're here because you've felt that pull toward the enigmatic, the sinister truths that polite society buries. Hit that like button, not just as a click but as a beacon drawing more souls into the light of these hidden horrors, so no story like Catherine's festers in isolation. And in the comments below, type these exact words: "I'm ready to discover the truth about this story." By doing so, you're not just engaging, you're forging a bond with this narrative, vowing to confront the darkness head-on. It marks you as part of our community, a cadre of truth-seekers who refuse to look away from what others dare not utter. We gather here to dissect the inexplicable, to honor voices like Catherine's that echo through the void. Thank you truly for stepping into this fray. Your courage amplifies the unheard, turning whispers into a roar against the silence. Prepare yourself, because what comes next contains a key revelation that will forever change the way you see the human mind. In the quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Creek, Chicago, 1997, the Doyle residence stood as a monument to suburban perfection. A two-story colonial with a manicured lawn, a basketball hoop nailed above the garage, and a porch swing that creaked softly under summer breezes. Neighbors envied the Doyles' apparent harmony. Thomas Doyle, a high school history teacher with a warm smile and a knack for storytelling, was the kind of man who coached Little League and volunteered at church bake sales. His daughter, Catherine, was the apple of his eye, a shy girl with a toothy grin who clutched her stuffed rabbit during neighborhood barbecues. To outsiders, they were the picture of resilience after tragedy. The widower and his daughter soldiering on after the untimely death of Ellen Doyle, Thomas's wife, who succumbed to breast cancer 4 years prior. But beneath the polished veneer of their daily routines, something insidious festered, a darkness that thrived in the spaces where no one thought to look. Thomas was a master of masks. At school he was beloved, his classroom a haven of engaging lectures and thoughtful debates about the American Revolution. Colleagues admired his dedication, how he stayed late grading papers, his tie loosened, a cup of coffee perpetually in hand. Parents praised his patience, the way he encouraged even the quietest students to find their voice. Yet in the privacy of his home, that same patience twisted into something methodical, predatory. Night after night, as the world outside slept, he entered Catherine's room under the guise of tucking her in, his whispers cloaked in paternal affection. "This is how daddies show love," he'd murmur, his voice a sickening lullaby as he enacted his so-called secret games. Catherine, barely 8, learned to dread the creak of her bedroom door, her small body tensing under the weight of his presence. The stuffed rabbit, her only witness, absorbed tears she couldn't shed in daylight. The neighborhood saw none of this. To them, Thomas was a grieving man doing his best, and Catherine's withdrawn demeanor was chalked up to a child's lingering sorrow over her mother's death. At school, her teachers noted her declining grades and occasional outbursts. Once, she threw a crayon across the room when asked to draw a family portrait. But these were dismissed as phases. The growing pains of a girl without a mother. No one connected the dots between her sudden aversion to physical touch and the father who walked her to the bus stop each morning, his hand resting a little too long on her shoulder. The community's blindness was not neglect but trust, a collective faith in the narrative Thomas had crafted. A devoted father, a wounded but healing family, a life pieced together after loss. Yet, cracks began to form, subtle but undeniable. Catherine's best friend Lily, a freckled 9-year-old from across the street, noticed how Catherine flinched when her father called her name during their playdates. Once, while braiding each other's hair in Lily's treehouse, Catherine whispered, "Sometimes I wish I could run away forever." Lily laughed it off, thinking it a childish fantasy, but the hollow look in Catherine's eyes lingered in her memory, a puzzle piece she couldn't place. At the local diner, where Thomas often took Catherine for Saturday pancakes, the waitress began to notice how Catherine pushed her food around her plate, her gaze fixed on the table as if searching for an escape in the grain of the wood. These were fleeting moments, easily rationalized, but they were the first threads unraveling the tapestry of Thomas's carefully constructed lie. Behind closed doors, Thomas's mind was a labyrinth of rationalizations. He wasn't a monster, he told himself. His actions were a distorted echo of the rituals his own father had inflicted upon him as a boy in the 1970s. A cycle of abuse he'd vowed to break, but instead reframed as sacred. In his grief-stricken psyche, warped by untreated trauma from Ellen's death, he convinced himself these acts were a way to keep Catherine close, to shield her from the world's cruelty by binding her to him in a way no one else could. He saw his behavior not as violation but as a perverse form of healing, a delusion so deeply rooted it mimicked love in his fractured mind. Psychiatric records, later uncovered, would reveal early signs of this delusion: his obsessive journaling about protecting Catherine's purity, his sleepless nights spent staring at old photos of Ellen, as if her absence justified his descent. The dissonance between Thomas's public persona and private torment was a ticking bomb. Catherine, too young to articulate the full scope of her suffering, began to internalize the shame he imposed. "If you tell," he'd warn, his voice low and steady, "they'll take you away and you'll have no one." Her silence was her prison, but it was also her rebellion's crucible. Each night as she lay awake, her mind churned with fragments of defiance, a plan forming in the quiet spaces between fear and despair. The rotary phone in the living room, a relic from her mother's era, became her fixation, its numbers glowing in her mind like a lifeline to a world beyond her father's reach. As Catherine's fixation on the rotary phone grew, so did the invisible chains binding her to her father's distorted reality, each day blending into a monotonous haze of feigned normalcy, punctuated by nocturnal dread. In the weeks leading up to that fateful midnight call, the Doyle household pulsed with an undercurrent of unspoken tension, like a storm cloud heavy with rain yet refusing to break. Thomas, ever the vigilant guardian of his secrets, began to notice subtle shifts in his daughter's behavior, her averted eyes during dinner, the way she lingered in the bathroom after baths, scrubbing her skin raw as if to erase invisible stains. He dismissed these as the whims of a growing child, his mind too entangled in its own justifications to recognize the brewing revolt. Instead, he doubled down on his rituals, framing them as essential bonds in their fractured family unit, whispering assurances that echoed his own father's words from decades past. "This keeps us strong. Kitty, it's our way." But Catherine, her young mind a battlefield of confusion and burgeoning resolve, started piecing together fragments of wrongness, drawing strength from fleeting memories of her mother, Ellen's gentle hugs, her stories of brave heroines who escaped dragons. Delving deeper into Thomas's psyche revealed a man not born monstrous, but sculpted by the relentless chisel of inherited trauma. Born in 1960 to a stern factory worker in Detroit, Thomas's childhood was a gauntlet of physical and emotional brutality. His father, a veteran haunted by Vietnam flashbacks, viewed affection through the lens of dominance, enforcing lessons that left welts on young Thomas's back and scars on his soul. "Real men toughen their kin," the old man would grunt, his belt whistling through the air, blending pain with twisted paternal pride. Thomas's mother, a meek housewife, turned a blind eye, her silence a complicit shroud that taught him early the power of denial. By adolescence, Thomas internalized this cycle, burying the abuse under layers of academic achievement and outward charm. He fled to college on a scholarship, vowing to rewrite his narrative. But the seeds of delusion had taken root, dormant until Ellen's death unearthed them like a grave robber exposing bones. Ellen's passing in 1993 was the catalyst that ignited Thomas's psychiatric descent. Diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer at 32, she withered over months of chemotherapy, her once vibrant spirit dimming like a candle in wind. Thomas, then 33, watched helplessly as hospital machines beeped their indifferent rhythms, his grief morphing into an obsessive need for control. In therapy sessions he attended sporadically, urged by concerned colleagues, he spoke of survivor's guilt, but never the deeper fissures. The psychiatrist noted early signs of delusional disorder, Thomas's fixation on preserving Ellen's essence through Catherine, whom he saw as a reincarnation of his wife's purity. He began collecting mementos, Ellen's hairbrush, her favorite scarf, arranging them in Catherine's room like talismans. But therapy lapsed. Thomas convinced himself he was healing, that his games were a therapeutic bridge, a way to merge past and present in a delusion of unity. Psychiatric experts later analyzing his journals would describe this as a classic case of intergenerational trauma, manifesting as complex PTSD intertwined with erotomania-like fixations, where love became possession and boundaries dissolved into madness. Catherine, unwittingly caught in this web, began to manifest her own psychological fractures. At school, her artwork shifted from colorful landscapes to dark scribbles, figures with elongated limbs reaching out, houses with barred windows, a recurring motif of a rabbit trapped in thorns. Her teacher, Mrs. Hargrove, a kindly woman in her 50s, pulled Catherine aside one afternoon in the art room, the scent of tempera paint thick in the air. "What's troubling you, dear?" she asked, her voice soft as she knelt to Catherine's level. Catherine hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress, the words "Daddy's games" bubbling to her lips but swallowed back like bitter medicine. Instead, she mumbled about missing her mom, tears streaking her cheeks. Mrs. Hargrove hugged her, oblivious to the deeper abyss, and sent a note home suggesting family counseling. Thomas intercepted it, his face flushing with controlled rage as he read it over dinner, the fork clinking against his plate like a warning bell. That night, his visit to Catherine's room was harsher, his whispers laced with accusation. "You wouldn't betray us, would you? We're all we have." The neighborhood, still ensnared in the facade, offered unwitting reinforcement to Thomas's isolation. Block parties buzzed with superficial chatter, Mrs. Jenkins from next door praising Thomas's gardening skills, Mr. Patel sharing barbecue tips, while Catherine played in the background, her laughter forced and hollow. Lily, her friend, grew more insistent during their secret treehouse meetings, pressing for details about Catherine's sad spells. One humid July evening, as fireflies danced in the dusk, Catherine confided a sliver, "Daddy makes me play games that hurt." Lily's eyes widened, but at 9, she lacked the vocabulary for horror, mistaking it for roughhousing gone wrong. "Tell a grown-up," she urged, but Catherine shook her head, fear sealing her lips. This partial confession, however, planted a seed in Lily, who mentioned it casually to her mother over breakfast the next day. Mrs. Reynolds, a busy accountant, furrowed her brow but dismissed it as kids' exaggeration, promising to chat with Thomas at the next gathering. The ripple stopped there, absorbed by the community's inertia. Thomas's internal world, meanwhile, spiraled further. Sleepless nights found him pacing the living room, the rotary phone mocking him from its cradle as if it knew the threat it posed. His delusions intensified. He began interpreting everyday events as signs. A news report on child abductions as validation for his protection, a sermon at church about family bonds as divine endorsement. Psychiatric literature on similar cases highlights how such minds construct elaborate narratives to evade guilt, turning victims into complicit participants in a shared fantasy. For Thomas, Catherine wasn't a child, but an extension of himself, her pain a necessary sacrifice for their eternal connection. Yet, doubt flickered in rare moments, a glimpse of her tear-streaked face in the mirror, a memory of his own childhood pleas ignored, but he quashed them with alcohol, the bottle becoming his nightly companion. Catherine's resolve hardened amid this turmoil. Stolen moments alone allowed her to rehearse the call in her mind, mouthing the numbers, imagining the operator's voice as a savior's whisper. The stuffed rabbit, now her confidant, bore witness to her silent vows. "One day, I'll tell." The air in the house thickened with anticipation, each creak of the floorboards a potential harbinger of exposure. As summer waned into fall, the first chill winds rattling the windows, Catherine's secret plans coalesced, her small heart pounding with a mix of terror and hope. The phone, once a symbol of entrapment, transformed into her weapon, its dial tone a siren call to freedom. As the first autumn leaves skittered across the driveway like fleeing secrets, Catherine's transformation of the rotary phone into a beacon of hope accelerated her internal countdown, each passing day eroding the walls of her enforced silence with the persistence of dripping water on stone. The house, once a fortress of isolation, now felt charged with impending rupture, its rooms echoing with the ghost of unspoken accusations. Thomas, sensing an intangible shift in the air, perhaps in the way Catherine's eyes darted away from his during breakfast, or how she clutched her school bag like a shield, responded by tightening his grip, his games evolving into more frequent, insistent sessions that left her body aching and her spirit frayed. He framed these escalations as necessities, his voice a velvet trap. "The world out there is colder than you know. Kitty, this is how we stay warm together." But Catherine, her mind sharpening like a blade against the whetstone of suffering, began to hoard moments of solitude, slipping into the living room during his evening showers to practice dialing imaginary numbers, her fingers trembling on the cool plastic, rehearsing words that tasted like forbidden fruit. This period marked the deepening chasm in Thomas's psychiatric profile, a descent where his delusions blossomed into full-fledged paranoia, intertwining with the remnants of his unresolved grief like vines choking a tree. Psychiatric evaluations post-arrest would later classify his condition as a severe form of delusional disorder, with elements of obsessive-compulsive tendencies, exacerbated by the isolation of single parenthood. He started keeping a second journal, hidden in his nightstand drawer amid old letters from Ellen, where he chronicled perceived threats to their sacred bond. Entries grew erratic, The teacher suspects must redirect. Kitty's eyes betray hesitation. Reinforce the rituals tonight. These writings revealed a man unraveling, his mind constructing enemies from shadows. Mrs. Hargrove's note became evidence of a conspiracy. Lily's innocent questions a probe from outsiders. He began locking doors earlier, drawing curtains against prying eyes, his once open demeanor curdling into suspicion. Sleep evaded him, replaced by vigils at Catherine's bedside, watching her feign slumber. His breath ragged as he murmured justifications drawn from distorted memories of his father's tough love. Catherine's school life became a parallel arena of quiet turmoil, where the weight of her secret manifested in physical and emotional symptoms that puzzled but didn't alarm her peers and educators. During recess, she withdrew to the far corner of the playground, sitting cross-legged under a maple tree whose leaves mirrored the bruises blooming on her thighs. Hidden blooms of purple and yellow that she concealed under tights, even in the lingering warmth of early fall. Classmates whispered about her weirdness, how she jumped at sudden noises like the slam of a locker or the teacher's raised voice. One boy, Tommy, a boisterous 10-year-old with a gap-toothed grin, tried to include her in a game of tag. But when he tagged her shoulder, she recoiled as if burned, tears springing unbidden. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, confusion furrowing his brow. But Catherine mumbled an excuse about a bee sting and fled to the bathroom, where she huddled in a stall, rocking back and forth, the stuffed rabbit smuggled in her backpack her only comfort. These incidents accumulated like storm clouds, yet the school counselor, overburdened with caseloads, scheduled a meeting that Thomas deftly postponed with a charming phone call, citing family adjustments. In the intimacy of their home, the whispers in the dark took on a literal form. As Thomas's sessions grew more verbal, layering psychological manipulation atop the physical violations, he wove tales of abandonment, painting vivid pictures of orphanages where children like her were forgotten, their cries echoing in endless halls. "Without me, you're nothing," he'd hiss in the dim light of her room, the bedside lamp casting elongated shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Catherine, her resilience a flickering flame, countered internally with counter-narratives drawn from fragments of television shows and library books, stories of kids who escaped bad homes, finding kind strangers who listened. The library became her sanctuary. On afternoons when Thomas graded papers in his study, she'd bike there, devouring books on adventure and survival, her mind absorbing images of heroines dialing for help, police sirens wailing like salvation. One book, a tattered copy of The Secret Garden, resonated deeply, its theme of hidden wounds mirroring her own, inspiring her to bury a small note under the backyard swing. "Help me," scrawled in crayon, a childish talisman against despair. The neighborhood's unwitting complicity deepened during this phase, as casual interactions reinforced Thomas's facade while inadvertently heightening Catherine's isolation. At a community potluck in the park, Thomas chatted amiably with parents, his arm slung casually over Catherine's shoulders, her body stiffening imperceptibly under the touch. Mrs. Reynolds, Lily's mother, pulled him aside amid the laughter and clink of plates, mentioning Lily's offhand comment about games that hurt. Thomas's face paled momentarily, but he recovered with a chuckle. Dismissing it as kids' roughhousing, Catherine's got quite the imagination since her mom passed. Mrs. Reynolds nodded sympathetically, her concern assuaged by his earnest eyes, and the moment passed like smoke. Later, as families dispersed under the setting sun, Catherine overheard the exchange from behind a tree, her heart sinking like a stone in water. That night, her resolve crystallized further. The phone's siren call grew louder, drowning out the whispers of doubt. Thomas's paranoia manifested in subtle surveillances, checking Catherine's backpack for notes, listening at her door during phone calls with Lily, even installing a cheap lock on the living room cabinet where the phone resided, though he often forgot to secure it in his distracted state. His journals overflowed with frantic entries blending biblical references with psychological distortions. Like Abraham's test, this is our covenant. Doubters are the serpents in Eden. Experts reviewing these would note the progression toward a messianic complex, where he positioned himself as Catherine's savior, her pain a purifying fire, yet glimmers of his former self surfaced in rare, tender moments, reading her bedtime stories from history books, his voice warm as he described heroic figures overcoming adversity, creating a cognitive dissonance that tortured Catherine, blurring the lines between monster and father. As October's chill deepened, Catherine's secret rehearsals escalated. One moonless night, while Thomas dozed in his armchair over a glass of whiskey, she crept downstairs, the floorboards creaking like accusations. Her hand hovered over the phone, heart hammering, but a noise from upstairs froze her. His snort as he stirred. She retreated, but the near miss fueled her determination, transforming fear into fuel. The whispers in the dark, once solely his domain, now included her own defiant murmurs. Soon. I'll tell soon. The house held its breath, the tension coiling tighter, poised for the inevitable snap that would shatter the illusions forever. With the house's tension wound to a fever pitch, like a violin string stretched beyond endurance, the inevitable snap arrived on a crisp November night in 1997, when the first frost etched delicate patterns on the windows, mirroring the fragile cracks in Catherine's resolve. Thomas, exhausted from a long day of parent-teacher conferences where he fielded compliments on his remarkable poise as a single father, retired early to his study, the door ajar as he pored over lesson plans under the harsh glow of a desk lamp. Catherine, feigning homework in her room, waited for the telltale creak of his footsteps ascending the stairs, her heart a drumbeat echoing in her ears. The clock downstairs chimed 11, each toll a step closer to liberation or ruin. Slipping from her bed in stocking feet, she navigated the darkened hallway like a shadow, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm for courage, its button eyes reflecting the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. The living room loomed ahead, the rotary phone perched on its stand like a sentinel, unlocked in Thomas's rare lapse of vigilance. Her small hand reached out, fingers curling around the receiver with a determination forged in months of silent suffering. The dial tone hummed in her ear, a symphony of possibility that drowned out the distant rumble of a passing train. She spun the numbers 911, each click resounding like a declaration of war against the tyranny of her father's delusions. The line connected, and a calm female voice answered, 911, what's your emergency? Catherine's breath hitched, words tumbling forth in a rush, her voice a quivering thread. My daddy hurts me. In bad ways. Please send help. Upstairs, Thomas stirred at an unfamiliar sound, his instincts prickling as he set down his pen. The operator, trained for such horrors, probed gently. Can you tell me your address, sweetie? What's happening? Catherine whispered the details, her eyes darting to the stairs, fear mingling with exhilaration as she described the games in halting terms, each revelation peeling back layers of shame like onion skins. He comes at night. It hurts inside. He says it's love, but it's not. The operator's typing clacked in the background, dispatching units even as she soothed. Help is coming. Stay on the line. Thomas, now fully alert, descended the stairs with predatory quiet, his slippers muffling his steps on the carpet. The murmur of Catherine's voice reached him midway, freezing him in place like a statue carved from dread. He crept closer, ear pressed to the banister, fragments piercing his delusion. He touches me where he shouldn't. Please hurry. Panic surged through him, a tidal wave crashing against the shores of his carefully built world. His mind raced, rationalizations fracturing. This was betrayal, a serpent in his garden, but deeper, a mirror reflecting the monster he denied. In that instant, flashes of his own childhood assaulted him, his father's belt, the locked doors, the pleas ignored. Was this the cycle's cruel echo? He burst into the living room, his face a mask of thunderous betrayal, snatching the phone from Catherine's grasp. Who is this? He barked, his voice cracking. The operator, undeterred, demanded, Sir, police are en route. Step away from the child. Thomas slammed the receiver down, his breath ragged, turning to Catherine with eyes wild as a cornered animal. What have you done? He whispered, not in anger but in a hollow despair that hinted at the psychiatric chasm yawning within. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder like an approaching judgment. Catherine backed against the wall, the rabbit dropping to the floor, its fall a soft thud amid the chaos. Thomas paced, hands raking through his hair, muttering incoherently, It's not what you think. It's protection, Ellen would understand. His delusions crumbled under the weight of reality, exposing the raw underbelly of his trauma. The untreated PTSD from his wife's death, the intergenerational abuse manifesting as a warped attachment disorder. Psychiatric terms later applied by experts, dissociative identity elements, where he compartmentalized his actions as a separate guardian self, flashed in his mind unbidden, remnants from those aborted therapy sessions. He lunged toward Catherine not to harm but to plead, his knees buckling as he collapsed before her. "Forgive me, Kitty. It's the only way I knew." But she shrank away, her eyes steel for the first time, the child's vulnerability hardening into accusation. Blue and red lights pierced the curtains, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow. Tires screeched on the driveway, doors slamming as officers approached, their knocks thunderous on the front door. "Police, open up!" Thomas rose unsteadily, glancing at Catherine with a mix of remorse and resignation, the facade shattering irreparably. He opened the door to two uniformed officers, their faces stern under the porch light, badges glinting like stars of fate. "We're responding to a child endangerment call," the lead officer stated, his eyes scanning the scene. Catherine, summoning courage from depths she didn't know she possessed, stepped forward. "It's me," I called. The officers separated them gently, one ushering Catherine to the couch while the other cuffed Thomas, reading him his rights in a monotone that belied the gravity. Neighbors' lights flickered on, curtains twitching as the cul-de-sac awoke to the scandal unfolding in their midst. In the squad car, Thomas sat in stunned silence, his mind a whirlwind of fragmented justifications and emerging guilt. Flashbacks intensified. Ellen's hospital bed, her final words urging him to be strong for Catherine, now twisted into irony. The arrest triggered his first genuine confrontation with his psyche, whispers of therapy echoing as handcuffs bit into his wrists. Catherine, wrapped in a blanket by a female officer, clutched her rabbit anew, her small frame trembling but her voice steady as she recounted details to the arriving social worker. The house, once a prison, now swarmed with investigators, flashlights probing corners where secrets had festered. Evidence emerged swiftly. Thomas's journals hidden in his study. Pages upon pages of delusional ramblings that painted a portrait of a mind besieged by untreated demons. The immediate aftermath unfolded in a blur. Catherine whisked to a hospital for examination, her bruises catalogued like evidence in a trial of the soul. Doctors noted not just physical trauma but psychological markers. Dissociation, anxiety spikes mirroring those in abuse survivors. Thomas, in holding, underwent a preliminary psych eval, his responses revealing the depth of his disorder. "I was saving her from the world," he insisted, tears streaking his face, a man broken by his own illusions. The community reeled, whispers rippling through phone lines and fences, Mrs. Reynolds berating herself for ignoring Lily's tip, Mrs. Hargrove replaying classroom moments with regret. The breaking point, long deferred, had arrived, unleashing a cascade that would expose the fragility of assumed normalcy and the psychiatric undercurrents that propel ordinary men into monstrosity. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of reluctant light, Catherine sat in a foster home's kitchen, a mug of hot chocolate warming her hands, her mind already turning toward healing. The call, her act of defiance, had shattered the chains, but the echoes of that night would resonate, a testament to the human mind's capacity for both destruction and redemption. As the pale light of dawn filtered through the lace curtains of the foster home, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor, Catherine sipped her hot chocolate slowly, the steam rising like ethereal spirits from the mug, each breath a tentative reclaiming of her shattered world. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Ms. Harlan with kind eyes etched by years of witnessing similar tragedies, sat across from her, notepad in hand, gently coaxing details that would form the backbone of the impending investigation. Catherine's words came haltingly at first, then in a torrent, painting vivid pictures of nights blurred by tears and mornings masked by forced smiles. Outside, the neighborhood stirred with the news. Whispers over coffee cups, shocked glances across fences, as police tape fluttered around the Doyle residence, transforming the once idyllic home into a crime scene pulsating with forensic activity. Investigators combed through rooms, bagging Thomas's journals as key evidence, their pages a roadmap into his deranged psyche, while neighbors clustered in driveways, piecing together overlooked signs with hindsight's cruel clarity. The machinery of justice lurched into motion, with the efficiency of a system designed for such horrors, yet riddled with the human frailties that allowed them to persist. Thomas, detained in a stark holding cell at the local precinct, underwent his first formal psychiatric evaluation that morning, a court-mandated assessment conducted by Dr. Evelyn Marks, a forensic psychiatrist specializing in trauma-induced disorders. Seated across a metal table bolted to the floor, Thomas appeared diminished, his once confident posture slumped, eyes hollow from a night without sleep. Dr. Marks, her voice measured and probing, delved into his history. The abusive father, the suppressed memories, the cataclysmic loss of Ellen. Thomas's responses oscillated between defiance and despair. I was her guardian, you see. The world is full of wolves, revealing a mind fractured by layers of delusion. She noted classic indicators of complex PTSD intertwined with narcissistic traits, where empathy eroded under the weight of self-preservation. His games, he insisted, were acts of devotion, a ritualistic echo of his own upbringing reframed as salvation. Dr. Marks's preliminary report, typed furiously on a laptop in the adjacent room, classified him as a high-risk offender, recommending immediate inpatient evaluation at a state psychiatric facility, her words underscoring the psychiatric labyrinth. A man not purely evil, but a product of unchecked mental decay. Meanwhile, Catherine's examination at the Children's Hospital unfolded in a sterile room, painted with cheerful murals that clashed grotesquely with the gravity of the procedure. Pediatric specialists documented physical evidence, scars faint but telling, inflammation speaking volumes of repeated trauma, while a child psychologist, Dr. Lena Torres, engaged her in play therapy, using dolls to externalize the unspeakable. Catherine positioned the father doll aggressively, her small hands trembling as she narrated, "He says it's a secret, but secrets hurt." Dr. Torres observed dissociation episodes, where Catherine's gaze drifted, her voice monotone, symptoms akin to those in young survivors of prolonged abuse. Reports filed that day highlighted her resilience, a spark of defiance amid the wreckage but warned of long-term risks. Anxiety disorders, trust issues, potential PTSD mirroring her father's, a chilling reminder of trauma's hereditary shadow. Foster parents, the Millers, a compassionate couple vetted by the system, welcomed her into their home that afternoon, their spare room adorned with books and toys, a tentative sanctuary where Catherine clutched her rabbit, whispering promises of safety to its worn ears. The investigation deepened as detectives peeled back the layers of Thomas's life, interviewing colleagues, neighbors, and distant relatives to construct a timeline of his unraveling. At the high school, Principal Vargas expressed disbelief, recounting Thomas's exemplary record but unearthed old complaints. A student's uneasy report of weird vibes dismissed as adolescent fancy. Neighbors like Mrs. Reynolds provided statements laced with guilt. Lily mentioned something, but I thought it was nothing, while Lily herself, wide-eyed in a police interview room, corroborated Catherine's partial confessions from their treehouse talks. Evidence mounted. Medical records from Ellen's illness showing Thomas's missed therapy appointments, bank statements revealing purchases of locks and surveillance gadgets, even a hidden camera in Catherine's room, its footage a damning chronicle of violations that turned stomachs in the evidence room. Prosecutors, led by Assistant DA Maria Gonzalez, a fierce advocate for child victims, built a case around aggravated sexual assault and endangerment, weaving in psychiatric testimony to argue intent born of delusion, not ignorance. Thomas's arraignment the following day played out in a crowded courtroom, the air thick with tension as reporters scribbled notes from the back rows. Shackled and clad in an orange jumpsuit, he pleaded not guilty. His lawyer, a public defender named Mr. Klein, citing mental incompetence as a preliminary defense. The judge, a stern veteran named Harlan, no relation to the social worker, set bail at an unattainable sum, remanding Thomas to custody pending psych eval. In the facility's psych ward, Thomas began group sessions, his interactions revealing further depths, denial interspersed with flashes of insight, like admitting his father's influence during a tearful confession to a therapist. "He broke me and I broke her," he murmured one evening, staring at the barred window. The moon a mocking witness. Medications were prescribed, antidepressants to stabilize mood, antipsychotics to quell delusions, but progress was glacial, his mind a fortress resisting siege. Catherine's world, in contrast, began tentative reconstruction. In the Miller's home, Routines emerged. School resumed with a counselor's support. Playdates with supervised peers. Therapy twice weekly where Dr. Torres employed art to unearth buried emotions. Drawings evolved from dark scribbles to tentative colors. A sun emerging from clouds, a girl holding a phone like a sword. Yet nights brought nightmares. Echoes of creaking doors jolting her awake, the rabbit her anchor in the storm. The system enveloped her. Caseworkers monitored progress. Legal guardians prepared for trial testimony. A victim advocate explained the process in child-friendly terms. Whispers of adoption floated, but first, justice demanded its due. As weeks blurred into months, the case garnered media attention. Headlines screaming "Suburban Nightmare Teacher's Dark Secret," sparking community forums on child protection. Thomas's family, estranged siblings from Detroit, surfaced with statements of shock, one brother recalling their father's brutality, adding fuel to the intergenerational narrative. Psychiatric debates ensued in academic circles, papers citing the Doyle case as a textbook example of how untreated trauma perpetuates cycles, delusions masking abuse as affection. Catherine, shielded from the spotlight, found solace in small victories. A new friend at school, a foster sibling's shared laughter, the gradual fading of bruises both seen and unseen. The labyrinth twisted onward, with pretrial motions debating Thomas's competency, experts clashing over whether his delusions negated mens rea. The guilty mind. Dr. Marks testified in hearings, her voice steady. He's aware enough to hide it, but warped enough to believe it's right. Catherine's recorded statement, played in chambers, sealed the trajectory, her voice, small but unwavering, detailing the unthinkable. As winter's grip tightened, snow blanketing Willow Creek in deceptive purity, the stage set for trial, where truths would clash like tectonic plates, reshaping lives in their quake. As winter's unyielding blanket of snow muffled the sounds of Willow Creek, transforming the suburb into a frozen tableau of suspended lives, the Doyle case hurtled toward its climactic confrontation in the courtroom, where the intricacies of Thomas's fractured psyche would be dissected under the harsh fluorescence of judicial scrutiny. Jury selection commenced in early January 1998, a meticulous process where potential jurors were grilled on their biases toward mental illness and child abuse. The air in the courthouse thick with the scent of polished wood and nervous anticipation. Catherine, now 9, prepared for her testimony in the Millers' cozy living room, practicing with Dr. Torres using puppets to simulate the stand, her voice gaining strength with each rehearsal. He hurt me, and I told because I had to. The Foster family enveloped her in normalcy, baking cookies, watching cartoons, yet the trial loomed like a specter, its shadow lengthening as dates approached. Thomas, meanwhile, languished in the state psychiatric ward. His days a regimented blur of therapy sessions and medication rounds, his mind a battleground where delusions clashed with emerging clarity, each pill a reluctant key unlocking suppressed horrors. The trial opened on a blustery February morning, the courtroom packed with spectators, reporters jostling for seats as Judge Harlan called order, his gavel's crack echoing like a fracture in time. Prosecutor Gonzalez stood tall, her opening statement a searing indictment. This is not just a story of abuse, but of a mind so twisted by untreated demons that it turned a father's love into a weapon. She painted Thomas as a calculated predator, his psychiatric issues a convenient veil, citing evidence from his journals where he meticulously planned rituals with chilling detachment. Defense attorney Klein countered with empathy, framing Thomas as a victim of his own psyche. Trauma begets trauma. Mr. Doyle's actions, while inexcusable, stem from a delusional disorder rooted in generational abuse and profound loss. The jury, a mix of blue-collar workers and professionals, leaned forward, their faces a mosaic of skepticism and sympathy, as the psychiatric undercurrents promised to dominate the proceedings. Witness testimonies unfolded like layers of an onion, each peeling revealing deeper rot in Thomas's mental architecture. Dr. Marks took the stand first, her expert demeanor unshaken under cross-examination, elucidating his condition with clinical precision. Delusional disorder, compounded by complex PTSD, Mr. Doyle genuinely believed his acts were protective, a cognitive distortion where harm masqueraded as care. She referenced brain scans from recent evaluations, projecting images on a screen that showed hyperactivity in the amygdala, the fear center, warped by chronic stress from his childhood and Ellen's death. It's like a short circuit, she explained, where grief reroutes empathy into obsession. The jury murmured, one woman dabbing her eyes, as Dr. Marks detailed similar cases from psychiatric literature, men whose untreated traumas manifested in familial violations, cycles perpetuated by denial. Klein seized on this, probing. So he's not a monster, but a man failed by the system? Dr. Marks nodded gravely. Precisely. Early intervention could have prevented this abyss. Catherine's testimony, shielded by closed-circuit TV to spare her the courtroom's glare, pierced the air like a dagger. Seated in a small room with Dr. Torres at her side, she recounted the nights in halting detail, her voice steady but laced with the tremor of revisited pain. He said it was our game, but it made me bleed sometimes. I hid under the covers, but he always came. The jury watched on monitors, faces paling as she described the psychological binds, the threats of abandonment, the twisted tales of love. Gonzalez guided gently. Why did you call that night? Catherine's eyes, wide and resolute, met the camera. Because I couldn't pretend anymore. The hurt inside was bigger than the fear. Cross-examination by Klein was mercifully brief, focusing on Thomas's good days and the stories, the hugs. But Catherine's unyielding gaze undercut any softening. Even on good days, the bad ones waited. The room fell silent as she finished, the weight of her words hanging like smoke, a child's truth dismantling an adult's illusions. Thomas's own testimony arrived midway, a pivotal moment where the labyrinth of his mind was laid bare for judgment. Escorted in restraints, he appeared gaunt, his eyes darting as if seeking escape in the paneled walls. Under Klein's questioning, he unraveled his narrative. After Ellen died, the world cracked. Catherine was all I had, my anchor. The rituals, they came from my father, but I twisted them into something healing. Or so I thought. His voice broke on memories of his abusive upbringing, detailing beatings that left him cowering, vows to be different that curdled into repetition. I saw wolves everywhere, strangers, even friends. Touching her kept her mind safe. The courtroom stirred, discomfort rippling as he described hallucinations post-Ellen's death, visions of her urging protection, blurring into commands for the games. Gonzalez pounced in cross. You documented it all, didn't that make you question? Thomas faltered. The journals were confessions to myself, but the delusion whispered they were right. Psychiatric aides noted his session afterward where he wept uncontrollably, a crack in the facade hinting at remorse's dawn. Supporting witnesses added texture to the psychiatric tapestry. Thomas's brother, flown in from Detroit, testified to their father's tyranny. Dad broke us both. Tom buried it deeper. A former therapist revealed aborted sessions where Thomas skirted his urges. Red flags ignored due to caseload overloads. Neighbors and colleagues provided contrasting portraits, the charismatic teacher versus the reclusive widower, highlighting dissociation's duality. Dr. Torres, speaking for Catherine, outlined her emerging PTSD, nightmares of locked doors, trust eroded like sandcastles in tide, yet glimmers of recovery through therapy. She's a survivor, Dr. Torres affirmed, but the mind scars run deep, potentially echoing her father's if unaddressed. The jury absorbed it all, notebooks filling with notes on delusions versus intent, the line between illness and culpability blurring like ink in water. As closing arguments neared, unexpected revelations surfaced during a sidebar, a hidden letter from Ellen, discovered in Thomas's attic during a secondary search, her dying words pleading for him to seek help for the shadows in your head. It humanized him further, sparking debates among jurors during breaks. Was he redeemable or irredeemable? Thomas, in solitary reflection, began journaling anew, this time with therapeutic guidance, entries shifting from justification to accountability. I see now the monster was me. Catherine, informed gently by Ms. Harlan, processed it with drawings of broken chains, her healing a counterpoint to his unraveling. The trial, a microcosm of psychiatric enigma, poised on verdicts that would echo beyond the gavel, questioning society's grasp on the mind's darkest corridors. As the trial's tension crested like a wave poised to crash, the closing arguments reverberated through the courtroom, each word a chisel chipping at the jury's resolve. leaving them to deliberate in a sequestered room, heavy with the scent of stale coffee and mounting pressure. Prosecutor Gonzalez delivered her summation with fiery precision, pacing before the jury box as she recapped the horrors. Thomas Doyle's mind may be a maze, but his actions were choices, deliberate, repeated, devastating. Do not let psychiatric labels eclipse the child's suffering. She gestured to the empty witness screen where Catherine's image had lingered, invoking the journal's cold calculations as proof of intent, urging a guilty verdict to affirm justice over sympathy. Defense attorney Klein, his tone somber and pleading, countered by humanizing the psychiatric quagmire. This is a tragedy of the mind's making, not malice. Thomas is a man ensnared by delusions born of trauma. Incarceration without treatment perpetuates the cycle. Mercy isn't weakness, it's understanding. The jury retired, their faces etched with the burden, as spectators filed out into the snowy February streets, the courthouse clock ticking like a heartbeat in suspension. Deliberations stretched over 3 agonizing days, the jury poring over exhibits in a windowless chamber, brain scans highlighting neural anomalies, Catherine's drawings of shadowed figures, Thomas's journals with their spiraling script that blurred the line between confession and madness. Debates raged. One juror, a retired nurse familiar with mental health wards, advocated for nuance. He's sick, but does that absolve the harm? Another, a father of young daughters, pushed back. Sickness doesn't erase choice. She was 8. Notes passed, votes shifted, the foreman mediating as emotions flared. Outside, media vans idled, reporters speculating on outcomes, while Catherine, insulated in the Miller's home, distracted herself with puzzles, her foster mother reassuring, "Whatever happens, you're safe now." Thomas, in his cell, attended mandatory sessions with a ward psychiatrist, dissecting dreams where Ellen accused him from beyond, his responses hinting at budding self-awareness. I built walls around my pain, and she paid the price. Medications dulled the delusion's edges, but guilt's sharp blade cut deeper, forging tentative paths toward accountability. The verdict arrived on a frigid afternoon, the courtroom reconvening in hushed anticipation, the air electric as the jury filed in, avoiding eyes. Judge Harlan polled them solemnly, the foreman's voice steady. On the count of aggravated sexual assault, we find the defendant guilty. Murmurs rippled, Thomas slumping forward, his face a canvas of resignation and relief. Guilty, but with a psychiatric rider recommending treatment over pure punishment. Additional charges of endangerment and psychological abuse followed suit, convictions stacking like stones in a cairn marking his fall. Gonzalez nodded grimly, vindicated for Catherine, while Klein prepared appeals grounded in mental incompetence. Sentencing loomed in weeks, but the immediate aftermath cascaded. Thomas transferred to a secure psychiatric prison unit, where intensive therapy awaited, group circles probing intergenerational wounds, individual sessions unraveling his father's legacy. "You're not defined by this," his new therapist intoned during intake, but Thomas whispered back, "Aren't I?" Catherine learned of the verdict via Ms. Harlan's gentle visit, the social worker kneeling to her level in the living room, sunlight slanting through blinds like bars dissolving. "He can't hurt you anymore," Ms. Harlan said, and Catherine's nod was small but certain, a tear tracing her cheek. Not for him, but for the girl she'd been. Therapy with Dr. Torres intensified post-trial, focusing on reclaiming agency, role-playing assertiveness, journaling positive affirmations that countered years of manipulation. Symptoms persisted, flinches at loud voices, nightmares of locked rooms, but progress emerged in milestones, sleeping through the night, laughing freely at school, befriending a classmate who shared her love of drawing. The Millers petitioned for permanent guardianship, their home evolving into a true haven, with family photos including Catherine, her smile genuine in snapshots. Community ripples extended. Willow Creek schools implemented abuse awareness programs inspired by the case, teachers trained to spot signs like Catherine's withdrawn art. Thomas's incarceration unveiled further psychiatric layers, his unit a microcosm of broken minds where inmates shared stories echoing his, veterans with PTSD, survivors of abuse turned perpetrators. In art therapy, he sketched distorted family portraits, the figures melting into shadows symbolizing his dissolving delusions. Medication stabilized moods, but confrontations in mirror exercises forced reckonings. "Look at what you did," the facilitator urged. And Thomas's reflections fractured, admitting, "I stole her childhood to mend my own." Appeals dragged on, Klein arguing diminished capacity, citing expert testimonies on how untreated grief can mimic sociopathy, but courts upheld the verdict, sentencing him to 20 years with mandatory treatment, parole contingent on psychiatric clearance. Letters from his brother arrived, bridging estrangement. "We both escaped, Dad, but you carried him further," Thomas responded haltingly, forging tenuous family ties amid isolation. Broader echoes resonated in psychiatric communities. The Doyle case, cited in conferences and journals as a paradigm of delusional perpetuation, sparking calls for better mental health screening for educators and parents. Media follow-ups humanized the narrative. Documentaries interviewing experts on cycle breaking. Catherine anonymized, but her courage lauded. In Willow Creek, the Doyle house sold to a young family oblivious to its ghosts, the neighborhood healing through vigils for abuse survivors. Catherine, thriving incrementally, enrolled in a support group for child victims, her voice strengthening as she shared, "Speaking saved me." Dr. Torres noted her evolving resilience, PTSD symptoms waning as trust rebuilt, though vigilance remained for latent triggers. As spring thawed the snow, revealing green shoots beneath, Thomas's therapy unearthed buried empathy, sessions delving into Ellen's loss as the delusion's genesis. "She was my light. Without her, I made darkness my guide." Regret crystallized in letters he wrote but never sent to Catherine, apologies scripted like penance. The resolutions, fractured and incomplete, underscored the mind's labyrinthine paths. Recovery not linear, but a mosaic of shattered pieces reassembled. Catherine, biking through blooming streets, felt the wind as freedom, her rabbit now a memento of endurance rather than terror. The case's shadows lingered, but light pierced through, illuminating paths forward for both victim and perpetrator in their separate journeys toward wholeness. As spring's tentative blooms gave way to the full flush of summer in 1998, painting Willow Creek in vibrant greens and sun-dappled sidewalks, Catherine's journey toward wholeness unfolded in fits and starts. Her bicycle rides through the neighborhood, a ritual of reclaiming spaces once tainted by fear. The Miller's home, with its backyard swing set and kitchen table laden with homemade meals, provided a stable canvas for her to repaint her life, but the phantoms of the past lingered like persistent fog, seeping into dreams and daylight alike. At school, she excelled in art class, her canvases evolving from chaotic storms to serene landscapes. Yet occasional triggers, a teacher's stern tone, a classmate's rough play, sent her retreating into silence, her hands clenching as if gripping an invisible lifeline. Dr. Torres, in their weekly sessions, navigated these minefields with care, employing cognitive behavioral techniques to reframe memories. "The hurt happened, but it doesn't define you," she'd say, guiding Catherine through breathing exercises that transformed panic into poise. The stuffed rabbit, now perched on her bedside table rather than clutched in desperation, symbolized this shift, a talisman of survival, its fur softened by time and tears. Thomas, confined within the beige walls of the psychiatric prison unit, grappled with his own phantoms in a regimented existence that blurred days into a continuum of introspection and intervention. Group therapy circles, arranged in a sterile room with plastic chairs forming a reluctant confessional, forced him to confront echoes of his actions through others' stories, fellow inmates recounting similar descents into delusion, their voices a chorus of shared shame. One man, a former accountant plagued by paranoid schizophrenia, mirrored Thomas's rationalizations. "I thought I was protecting my son from invisible threats. Turns out I was the threat." Thomas nodded, his contributions growing from defensive mutters to halting admissions. "My father's ghost lived in me, twisting love into chains." Individual sessions with Dr. Elias, a stoic psychiatrist with a penchant for Freudian probes, delved into the genesis of his disorder, unearthing suppressed episodes from adolescence, nights hiding from his father's rages, vowing protection for future kin that curdled into possession. Medications fine-tuned his neurochemistry, dampening the delusional whispers, but side effects, tremors, foggy thoughts added layers to his penance, reminding him daily of the mind's fragile machinery. The broader ripples of the case extended into societal undercurrents, As media retrospectives and advocacy groups amplified, Catherine's story anonymized as the brave, voice-inspiring legislative, pushes for mandatory mental health screenings in schools and enhanced child welfare protocols. In Chicago, a nonprofit founded in the wake of the trial offered therapy scholarships for abuse survivors, Catherine among its first beneficiaries, her anonymous testimonial fueling fundraisers where donors shared their own hidden scars. Willow Creek itself transformed subtly. Neighborhood watch programs incorporated abuse awareness training, parents like the Reynolds hosting workshops on spotting signs, Lily now a vocal advocate among her peers, her friendship with Catherine deepening into a sisterly bond forged in shared secrets. Yet beneath this progress lurked unresolved enigmas, whispers among locals about Thomas's extended family, rumors of a half-sibling from his father's side who suffered similarly, hinting at a wider web of intergenerational trauma that psychiatric researchers began to trace, publishing papers on the Doyle lineage as a case study in hereditary psychiatric vulnerability. Years accelerated, carrying Catherine into adolescence by the early 2000s. Her 13th birthday marked by a party at the Millers, now her legal guardians after adoption proceedings sealed in 2000, with balloons bobbing like buoyant hopes. Puberty brought new challenges, body image issues intertwined with trauma echoes, leading to therapy explorations of self-worth. Dr. Torres introducing mindfulness apps and journaling prompts that Catherine embraced, her entries evolving from "Why me?" to "What next?" School became a battleground of normalcy. She joined the art club, her pieces winning local contests, depictions of fractured mirrors symbolizing her psyche's mending. Romantic curiosities emerged tentatively, a crush on a classmate prompting discussions on healthy boundaries, her foster parents modeling affection without possession. Nightmares persisted sporadically, visions of creaking doors morphing into Thomas's face. But coping strategies fortified her. A panic button app on her phone, a support hotline memorized like a mantra. The rabbit, relegated to a shelf, watched over her room, a silent guardian of her evolution. Thomas's path meandered through the penal system's psychiatric corridors, his parole hearings commencing in 2005 after 7 years of treatment, evaluators noting marked progress, reduced delusional ideation, expressed remorse in victim impact simulations where he role-played apologies. "I've dissected my mind like a cadaver," he told the board, his voice steady, detailing how therapy revealed his actions as projections of unresolved grief. Ellen's death not just a loss, but a trigger for regressive behaviors echoing his father's authoritarianism. Denied parole initially due to risk assessments, he persisted in vocational programs, teaching history to fellow inmates, his lectures on cycles of power a meta-reflection on his life. Correspondence with his brother deepened, letters exchanging forgiveness and family lore, uncovering their father's undiagnosed bipolar disorder as a root contaminant. Psychiatric milestones included tapering medications, group facilitations where he mentored newcomers, his insights on delusion's grip earning respect from staff. Yet internal phantoms clawed back during solitary nights, doubts whispering, "Can a broken mind ever fully mend?" Catherine's awareness of Thomas sharpened with age. Media snippets and caseworker updates painted him not as a monster, but a cautionary figure of mental fragility. In 2003, a documentary on familial abuse featured blurred interviews, prompting her to pen an unsent letter. "You stole pieces of me, but I'm rebuilding stronger." Therapy unpacked this ambivalence, anger coexisting with pity for his fractured psyche, leading to advocacy involvement, where she volunteered anonymously at shelters, her empathy a weapon against similar cycles. The Millers supported her explorations, family vacations to national parks instilling wonder, countering isolation's legacy. Physical health checks revealed no lasting damage beyond emotional scars, but vigilance for PTSD flares remained, triggers like certain scents evoking visceral recalls. By 2007, as Catherine approached high school graduation, Thomas achieved conditional release to a halfway house, his freedom tethered to therapy mandates and no contact orders. Monitored closely, he rebuilt modestly, working as a librarian's assistant, his interactions limited to avoid triggers. Anonymous letters to Catherine's advocates conveyed amends. "I live with the echo of my wrongs. May she find peace." The phantoms, though dimmed, persisted for both. a shared psychiatric legacy of resilience amid ruin, their paths diverging yet parallel, testaments to the mind's enduring capacity for both devastation and renewal. Summer winds carried hints of closure, but the story's tendrils extended, unresolved enigmas beckoning further revelations in the tapestry of their lives. As the calendar pages flipped into the late 2000s, carrying Catherine toward the cusp of adulthood with the inexorable pull of time, her high school graduation in 2008 marked a poignant milestone, the auditorium filled with the rustle of gowns and the flash of cameras capturing smiles that masked deeper complexities. Standing on the stage, diploma in hand, she scanned the crowd for the Millers, her adoptive parents beaming with pride. Their applause a symphony of unconditional support, yet an undercurrent of absence tugged at her, a phantom limb of the family she once knew. The ceremony's pomp contrasted sharply with her internal landscape, where therapy-honed tools helped navigate the swells of emotion. Gratitude for her new life mingled with unresolved questions about Thomas, whispers of why that Dr. Torres encouraged her to explore through guided meditations, visualizing her trauma as a storm cloud dissipating over horizons. Post-graduation, she enrolled in community college, majoring in psychology, a deliberate choice to decode the mind's enigmas. Her coursework dissecting case studies that echoed her own, professors noting her insightful essays on abuse cycles with unknowing irony. Nights in her dorm room, surrounded by posters of empowering figures, brought occasional regressions, a news story on similar cases triggering flashbacks, her hand reaching instinctively for the rabbit now packed in a memory box, its presence a bridge to the child who dared to speak. Thomas, ensconced in the halfway house's structured routine by 2009, navigated re-entry with the caution of a man traversing a minefield, his days filled with menial library work, shelving books on history that once fueled his passion, now serving as mirrors to his fall. Parole officers monitored his compliance rigorously, weekly check-ins probing for delusion relapses, urine tests ensuring medication adherence that kept his PTSD at bay. Dr. Elias's sessions transitioned to outpatient, focusing on reintegration, role-playing social interactions, journaling exercises that chronicled small victories like a conversation with a coworker without paranoia creeping in. Yet revelations emerged unbidden, a routine medical exam uncovering a genetic marker for bipolar tendencies, linking back to his father's undiagnosed rages, prompting a reevaluation of his disorder as potentially hereditary, a biochemical undercurrent amplifying environmental traumas. This discovery, shared in group therapy, resonated with peers. "It's in the blood, but we choose the flow," one inmate-turned-friend mused, inspiring Thomas to volunteer at a men's support group, anonymizing his story to guide others from similar abysses. Letters to his brother evolved into visits, awkward reunions over coffee where they unpacked shared scars, unearthing family photos that revealed their mother's silent complicity as her own escape from abuse, layering the psychiatric narrative with matrilineal threads. The veils began to lift further when, in 2010, an investigative journalist contacted Catherine through her advocate, researching a book on intergenerational trauma inspired by high-profile cases like hers. Hesitant at first, Catherine agreed to an anonymous interview, her voice disguised in recordings that detailed not just the abuse, but the subtle psychiatric signs she retrospectively recognized in Thomas. His obsessive rituals post-Ellen's death, the way grief morphed into fixation during holidays, staring at empty chairs as if communing with ghosts. The journalist's probes unearthed new details, accessing sealed records with permissions, revealing Thomas's early suicide attempt in college, thwarted by a roommate, a red flag buried under academic accolades. This revelation hit Catherine like a delayed shockwave. In therapy, she processed it as a pivot point. "He was broken long before me," she articulated, shifting blame's weight, though forgiveness remained elusive, a distant shore. The book, published in 2012 under the title Echoes of Silence, anonymized her as Emily, but its release sparked media buzz, forums dissecting the psychiatric implications, experts debating nature versus nurture in televised panels where clips of similar survivors shared testimonies mirroring hers. Thomas encountered the book during a library shift, its cover staring back like an accusation, pages flipping to passages that dissected minds like his. Delusional disorders as adaptive mechanisms gone awry, trauma's epigenetic imprints altering gene expression across generations. Reading incognito, he experienced a profound unraveling, sessions with Dr. Elias intensifying as guilt resurfaced. "I see now how my silence perpetuated the chain," he confessed, leading to a mediated amends program where he drafted a letter to Catherine, vetted by professionals, expressing remorse without expectation. "Your courage exposed what I hid. I live to honor that by changing." Delivered through channels, it arrived in Catherine's mailbox in 2013, her hands trembling as she read, emotions cascading, rage, pity, a flicker of closure. Dr. Torres facilitated a response she chose not to send, instead burning it in a ritual bonfire with friends, ashes scattering like released phantoms, symbolizing her autonomy. By the mid-2010s, Catherine's professional path solidified. Graduating with honors in 2012, she pursued a master's in clinical psychology, interning at a child advocacy center where she counseled young survivors, her empathy a honed blade cutting through their isolations. Cases echoed hers, fathers with untreated disorders, children daring to speak, reinforcing her resolve. Though vicarious trauma necessitated self-care, yoga classes, support networks where she shared her story selectively, finding solidarity in peers, a relationship blossomed with a fellow student, Alex, whose gentle patience navigated her trust barriers. Their dates walks in parks where she tested vulnerability, revealing scars both literal and metaphorical. Marriage in 2017, a small ceremony with the Millers tearing up, marked a new chapter. Her vows including promises of open communication, a bulwark against secrets corrosion. Thomas, granted full parole in 2015 after evaluations deemed him low risk, relocated to a quiet town outside Chicago, working as a tutor for at-risk youth. His curriculum infused with lessons on emotional health, subtly atoning. Health scares, a heart murmur linked to stress, prompted deeper dives into his psyche. Hypnotherapy uncovering repressed memories of his mother's apologies whispered in the night. Adding maternal dimensions to his disorder, he authored anonymous articles for mental health blogs, dissecting delusion's grip without self-identification, contributions praised in comments that unknowingly echoed his victims' voices. A chance encounter with his brother's family introduced him to nieces, interactions supervised but healing, their innocence a mirror to what he stole from Catherine, fueling ongoing therapy. As the decade closed, converging paths hinted at unresolved tensions. Catherine's pregnancy in 2019 brought prenatal anxieties, therapy addressing fears of cycle repetition, her child's birth a triumphant defiance. Thomas learning indirectly through networks reflected in journals on legacy's weight. Psychiatric advancements, new studies on trauma's neuroplastic reversals, offered hope, both engaging in webinars, unaware of shared virtual spaces. The veils, though thinner, concealed final enigmas. A distant relative's contact revealing a family history of institutionalizations, suggesting broader genetic veils yet to lift. Lives intertwined in invisible threads, their stories a testament to the mind's persistent shadows and the light of revelation piercing through. As the veils of revelation continued to part into the 2020s, Catherine Doyle, now a seasoned psychologist in her 30s, with a thriving practice in Chicago specializing in trauma recovery, found herself at the helm of a nonprofit dedicated to breaking cycles of abuse, her own story anonymized in keynote speeches that inspired audiences nationwide. Married to Alex with 2 young children whose laughter filled their home like sunlight-piercing storm clouds, she had forged a life from the ashes of her childhood, yet the psychiatric echoes persisted in subtle ways. Annual check-ins with therapists to monitor latent PTSD triggers, a journal where she documented dreams of shadowy figures that dissolved upon waking, reminders that healing is a lifelong labyrinth rather than a destination. Her work delved into cases mirroring her father's, parents ensnared by delusions born of untreated grief, their minds twisted labyrinths where love curdled into control. And through it, she unraveled broader truths about the human psyche's fragility, advocating for early interventions that could sever intergenerational chains before they bound another generation. Publications under her name explored the neurobiology of delusion, citing advanced MRI studies showing how chronic stress remodels the prefrontal cortex, turning rational thought into a hall of mirrors where predators see protectors. Catherine's children, raised in an environment of open dialogue and emotional literacy, represented her ultimate defiance, Their innocent questions about Grandpa met with age-appropriate truths that emphasized resilience over victimhood, ensuring the phantoms of the past remained spectral rather than substantive. Thomas Doyle, in his 60s by 2025, lived a quiet existence in a small apartment on the outskirts of Detroit. His parole conditions long fulfilled, but his life a perpetual atonement, shaped by rigorous self-imposed therapy. Employed as a mentor in a re-entry program for former offenders with psychiatric histories, he shared anonymized versions of his story in dimly lit community centers, his voice gravelly with age as he dissected the delusion's anatomy. How Ellen's death in 1993 had been the spark, igniting dormant traumas from his father's Vietnam-scarred brutality, manifesting in a dissociative fog where his games with Catherine seemed like sacred rites. Recent psychiatric advancements, therapies incorporating virtual reality to confront past selves, medications targeting specific neural pathways, had further peeled back his mind's layers, revealing comorbid conditions like attachment disorders rooted in his mother's abandonment fears, a familial tapestry of mental vulnerabilities that extended to cousins institutionalized in the 1980s. He maintained a sparse journal, entries reflecting on Catherine's courage as the catalyst for his awakening. Her voice shattered my illusions, forcing me to face the monster in the mirror. Contact with his brother persisted, family gatherings tentative bridges over chasms of pain, where they discussed genetic testing that confirmed hereditary predispositions to mood disorders, prompting Thomas to donate to research funds anonymously, a quiet bid to prevent future echoes. Health declined gradually, arthritis from years in confinement, insomnia haunted by what-ifs, but purpose sustained him. His work preventing relapses in others a proxy for the redemption he could never fully claim from his daughter. The Doyle saga, drawn from the shadowy annals of American monsters, ultimately illuminates the profound unpredictability of the human mind, a vessel capable of harboring both profound love and unfathomable darkness, where unchecked trauma festers like a hidden wound, erupting in ways that scar generations. Catherine's daring confession in 1997 wasn't merely a child's cry for help. It was a seismic rupture exposing the psychiatric underbelly of seemingly ordinary lives, revealing how delusions can masquerade as devotion, turning homes into prisons and protectors into perpetrators. This case compels us to confront uncomfortable truths, that morality is not innate but nurtured, vulnerable to the erosions of grief, abuse, and denial, that justice, while a balm, cannot erase the psychic imprints left on survivors, and that safety is an illusion in a world where the mind's fractures can turn inward, devouring from within. It challenges our perceptions of evil, not as a monstrous other but as a potential within us all, dormant until triggered, urging vigilance against the subtle signs that precede descent. In reflecting on Catherine and Thomas, we see mirrored our own fragilities, the buried pains that, left unaddressed, could warp our realities, questioning whether anyone is truly immune to such unraveling. This story isn't just a chronicle of horror. It's a cautionary mirror held to society, reminding us that the most dangerous truths are those we dare not speak, lest they reveal the abyss staring back. You've made it to the end of this harrowing journey, brave viewer, a testament to your unyielding curiosity and strength of spirit. Not everyone dares to plunge into these depths, to confront the twisted corridors of the human psyche where light fears to tread. By staying with us through every revelation, every unsettling twist in Catherine's tale, you've proven yourself part of an elite cadre, the unflinching seekers who refuse to avert their gaze from the inexplicable, the ones who emerge from the darkness not shattered but enlightened. Congratulations. You've not only witnessed the full, unvarnished truth but claimed it as your own, a badge of honor in a world that prefers comforting illusions over raw realities. Your perseverance honors voices like Catherine's, ensuring they echo beyond the silence that once entombed them. Now, let's solidify this bond. Head to the comments and type these exact words. This story shattered my illusions about the human mind. By doing so, you're signaling to our most devoted followers that you're one of us, a committed explorer of the hidden and the horrific. Your comment weaves you into the fabric of our community, a network of truth hunters who gather in these digital shadows to dissect what society buries, building a fortress of shared knowledge against the unknown. Each phrase you share amplifies the chorus, drawing more souls into our circle and fostering connections that transcend the screen. united in our quest to unearth the unspeakable. But don't stop there. These stories thrive on exposure, like flames fed by oxygen, illuminating corners long shrouded in secrecy. Share this video far and wide. Let it spread like a whisper in the night, infiltrating feeds and conversations so that others may discover the truths no one else dares to utter. Imagine the impact. A single share could awaken someone teetering on the edge of ignorance, pulling them into the light of awareness, preventing the cycles that ensnared Thomas from claiming new victims. Your action becomes a ripple in the pond of collective consciousness, turning isolated horrors into communal warnings. And if this tale has ignited a fire within you, a restless hunger for more glimpses into the bizarre, the disturbing, the profoundly enigmatic, hit that subscribe button now. Think of it as unlocking a forbidden door to an underground vault, where each new video awaits like a coiled serpent, ready to strike with revelations that will haunt your thoughts and sharpen your perceptions. Subscribing inducts you into our exclusive enclave, a brotherhood and sisterhood of the bold who thrive on deciphering the mind's darkest puzzles, ensuring you're never left in the mundane when the extraordinary beckons. Together we'll keep probing the voids, unmasking the monsters that lurk not just in history but in the recesses of our own psyches. Continue watching, dear seeker. Let your curiosity for the sinister and the strange remain ever alive, for in these stories lies the key to understanding the fragile threads that bind us all. Until next time, stay vigilant. The next truth might be closer than you think.